Live. I am taking over OKclarity's page right now. My name is Gila Glassberg. I'm a registered dietitian and a certified intuitive eating counselor. And tonight's topic is really, really important. And I really appreciate people sending in questions. And I'm going to try to answer the questions as always. And feel free to ask your questions here, and I'll try to answer them during this time. I'll try to stay on for the whole 30 minutes. I might have to end a little bit earlier, but feel free to ask your questions here. Okay, so tonight's topic is how to handle diet talk during the holidays. Okay, so if that's not a loaded topic, I don't know what is, right? So it happens to be, I have a podcast called Get Into It with Gila, and this is something that I feel like I always do cover around Pesach time, Sukkot time, even Hanukkah. So first, let's just talk about why we're having this conversation. Diet talk around the holidays, right? Okay. So number one, you're with a lot of people, usually. Or maybe you're just with a lot of people that you're not usually with. There's a lot of food. There's a lot of big meals. There's a lot of food that you're not used to having. Like we say, like it's Thanksgiving every week for Shabbos, and Yontif holidays are just like every day is Thanksgiving, but like times two, because we have these two huge meals. We're also majorly off schedule. So like, besides for the fact that we have two huge meals of foods that we're not always used to having, we're also eating off schedule. So, everybody's different, but I've heard from clients that like, maybe they're waking up really late, like they're waking up at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock because they can. I mean, a lot of people can't, but if they can, and then they're going right to their meal, they're just like, either they're overeating or either they're overeating or they just feel like it's like really interesting to be eating like chicken for breakfast. So maybe they are feeling confused, like what to eat, when to eat. Maybe they're feeling like they are so hungry when they wake up and the meal starts so late that instead of eating like a real meal, they're just eating whatever's around. And then besides for that, there's usually like a long break from lunch to dinner. So maybe some people start their meal at 1 or 2 and their meal ends late. And then again, they don't eat until much later. So, they're starting their dinner much later and they're really hungry in between lunch and dinner. Like I never really understood why people say like, oh, I'm not even hungry, I had such a big lunch. Like, okay, but 5 or 6 hours later, most people probably would be hungry. I would be hungry. I'm always really hungry in between those long stretches of meals. And then you come to a meal like really, really late, depending on the night and where we're up to in the holidays. But let's say you're starting your meal at 9 or 10 or 11. It really depends on, even some communities just start really, really late. I've heard that from many clients that they start really late. So then you're starting your meal really hungry, like way, way, way too hungry. And then you're being served a very big, lavish meal of heavy food that you're not used to eating, and it's late at night. And, anyways, when it's late at night and we're trying to make food decisions, we're kind of like not really prepared. We don't really have the tools. We're tired and there's all this yummy food and we're really, really hungry and it's really late. So we might overeat and then feel really uncomfortable and then go to sleep on a full stomach and then wake up not feeling well. It's just kind of like, it could technically perpetuate that cycle. Okay, so that was just presenting like why this is such an important topic and why so many people struggle with it. On the one hand, I didn't really talk about the diet culture stuff, but just practically speaking, the food situation can feel like really hard and really out of control. Okay, so let's start with a few steps before the holiday. So how to handle diet talk during the holidays. This is about during the holidays, but what I want to drill into you tonight is that you need to come to the holidays prepared. You need to have a game plan. So what I like to call with clients is like your self-care plan, but you could really call it whatever you want. But you need to think about the things that are going to come up for you over the holidays. This is not a way for you to like beat yourself up because you didn't plan well. It's just that whatever you can try to plan for, I highly recommend that you do. You might not be able to, and you might forget and you might not be able to, and it might be harder than you think. Okay, so you'll learn for next time and you'll try to plan better next time. But like really seriously, the first and foremost thing is that I want you to think about a self-care plan. And that includes who are you going to be around that triggers you? That includes what are your trigger foods. That includes what are your trigger emotions that trigger you to use food. That includes what are your triggers over the holiday, whether it's people or not people, just things that really, really throw you for a loop. And yeah, basically just trying to remember from your last holiday as much as you can, like what really threw you off? Like what made it really, really hard, right? So number one, like going into the holiday, you want to make sure that you have a good self-care plan, because anything that does come up that, like, diet talk, I'm just looking at the questions, diet talk, feeling like you overate, maybe you're in your head too much, you're feeling influenced by other people around you because they're talking about their diet, or they're talking about I ate so much, I feel so gross. After a Yontif, I'm going to go on a diet, and you're trying not to be on a diet, and you're trying to really work through the process of intuitive eating, and forget diet culture. Or what about when we're with family members that make comments about the way our kids are eating, and like you're working so hard to create a healthy food dynamic in your house, and then you spend time with people that you're not usually with, and they just you feel like they're just taking over, and it's going in a place that you really didn't see coming. So first and foremost, you have to think about that. There are going to be people in your life most people have this over the holidays, that do things that really bug you and can really derail you if you're not prepared. So that's really number one, is that you must be prepared with what are your triggers. Number two is that you also have to be realistic with your expectations. So I feel like this is just helpful. Like, you probably will overeat at some meals. I overeat at some holiday meals because, again, sometimes I'm starting really hungry, and I don't always have control over that. The food's really, really yummy, and I'm not used to having that food, and I'm totally okay with that. And I think once you get used to practicing intuitive eating, these things come more naturally, and you also feel like you're able to eat in a way that might feel slightly uncomfortable, but not like you're going to throw up and feel horrible about yourself. Like, sometimes we do overeat, and there's really, there's nothing really wrong with it, for sure, not morally. It might not feel super comfortable for you, but it doesn't have to be that you overeat and then you feel horrible and then you fall into deep depression and then you feel like you're just going to end up binging anyways. It could just be that over the holidays we tend to overeat. When I say overeat, it means we eat past fullness. We eat foods that don't always feel so good in our body. I'm not saying that's bad. I'm not saying that's morally bad. What I'm saying is that you have the choice to decide how much is too much, really. And this is a practice. It's not something that you're going to know right off the bat. It's if you've been listening to any of the lives, you're going to start to understand the intuitive eating process of honoring your hunger, respecting your fullness, what foods actually satisfy you, rejecting the diet mentality. Hopefully you still have those principles in your back pocket to rely on. Okay, now number 3 is boundaries. So I'm sure a lot of the people on OKclarity over the next few days are going to be talking about boundaries and holidays, but I think it's really important reminder that with anything in life, whether it's you're trying to do intuitive eating and everyone around you is dieting, or it could be anything. You want to become a doctor and everyone in your life is telling you that you shouldn't become a doctor, right? Boundaries, right? People are going to have opinions about you, about your children, about the way you eat, about the way your children eat, about the way that you look. And that's not really your business, it's their business. So obviously that's easier said than done, but you can't control what other people do, right? I'm talking about realistic expectations. I think this took me a long time to come to the realization that people will do things that upset us. Instead of thinking I hope they don't say anything, and putting up a more realistic thing in your head, which is most people, people tend to continue doing what they're usually doing. I'm sure I say things that bother people and other people say things that bother you. And it's that the boundaries is really important. You have to state what is comfortable for you to hear or for your kids to hear, and really try to reinforce those boundaries. And at the same time, you might not be able to, that person might still do the things that bother you. Let's take it a step further. You need to have, going back to our plan, right? So let's say you're around people that always comment about your weight, always comment about the way you're eating, always comment about the way your children are eating, right? So you're going to go back to your self-care plan. Am I going to still make sure that I'm seeing my therapist over the holidays / being in touch with my therapist? Am I going to be journaling every single day? Am I going to be exercising? What about my affirmations? Maybe just this holiday is a time for you to really, if you have more time, not less time, maybe this is the time for you to really pamper yourself, actually go get a manicure and go get a massage and go out for the day and do something fun, and have that in your plan, so that you feel really fueled, that when people do cross your boundaries, which will probably happen over the holidays, you just feel better. And you might have to change environment. So if somebody in your, obviously every person's so different. So like, don't take this as advice for you specifically, like if you have a specific case, but, sometimes there are people in our lives that are more respectful of our boundaries, but we just need to remind them, and they really do appreciate that. And some people will never respect your boundaries. So that's a totally different thing that you just have to work with it. That means like maybe you only stay in that person's house for 1 hour and they might be upset at you, but that's okay. Don't take that so seriously. Like obviously every situation is different, but maybe you just have to reconfigure some dynamics in your family or with your friends or whoever you're around during the holidays that like it's really, really important that you stay like true to yourself and that you are protecting yourself. And sometimes that means like upsetting other people. Now, like take that with a grain of salt, but I don't mean like go around and upsetting everybody and not caring about other people's feelings. I mean that when you know that something's like really not good for you, like diet culture talk, you're healing from an eating disorder, you're really trying to reject diet mentality, and you know you're walking into a house where 10 people are dieting, or 10 people have just had bariatric surgery, or 10 people are no longer eating carbs, or whatever it is. It's like you need to know that that might not be a safe environment for you, and in that case you might have to say, right now I'm not coming for whatever reason. You don't have to explain yourself, and really stick to that boundary. Okay, so let's, if anybody has any questions, I'm going to read the questions. Okay, so here are the questions. I hope that like what I just said kind of answered the questions, but I'm just going to read them and then reiterate. Okay, so mother-in-law says, I'm anorexic, but I'm actually overweight and she barely eats ever. How can I finally confront her? Okay, so lots of layers to this question. Really, people shouldn't be making comments about other people's bodies, so that needs to be said straight up. Like, I really don't appreciate you making comments about my body, right? And if she continues to make comments about your body, so again, some people are like just, they don't always get it, and you need to reinforce the boundary. Sometimes you might have to say, like the way Brene Brown explains boundaries is, if you do X, I'll have to do Y. So like, okay, the next time you make a comment about my body, like I'm going to have to leave the room, or I'm not going to be able to come back tomorrow. I just can't. Okay, repeat the question. Yes. Mother-in-law says, I'm anorexic, but I'm actually overweight and she barely eats ever. How can I finally confront her? Yeah. So sorry, going back to your mother-in-law. Okay, so you said, how could I confront her? So that's a question in and of itself. Like maybe this is a good time for you to work on your skills of like being open and honest with people. Again, I happen to love Brene Brown's discussions around this. I'm sorry that I'm getting distracted. It's hard to read the questions and look at the screen. But I actually tell this to a lot of my clients that I write on my bedroom wall. I write quotes that like really resonate with me, and I want to look at them like every single day, because like if you don't have it in your head, like you don't remember. So I have a lot of Brene Brown quotes, but she says that clear is kind and unclear is unkind, and that really, really resonates. Like I think about it a lot. Clear is kind, unclear is unkind, because we think in our head, I think a lot of us think in our head that like, oh, like I'll just try to let it go and I won't say anything because like I know that it's offensive to me, but like she doesn't know and she didn't mean it, and blah blah blah, until like all that resentment builds and all that negative energy builds within a relationship. And if we were clear with the person, like I really do not, I can't have you commenting about my body. It depends on the relationship, right? Like some people you could share, like I've struggled with my weight, I've struggled with how I feel about in my body, I have had an eating disorder, I have an eating disorder, it's a really sensitive topic for me, please don't comment on my body. If she really doesn't get it, then you have to put in a boundary, which is like, there's so many ways to put in a boundary. I can't really explain it like individually. So you could, if you're here, you could ask more questions or you could ask me after, but like, it really depends on the relationship, right? So let's say, some mother-in-laws or some people respond better to like, I love you so much, I love being around you, I'm so excited to be near you. It doesn't sound so much like that by the question, but you never know. And I just wanted to let you know that like I really do not appreciate when you call me anorexic or when you make any comments about my body. Okay, that's number one. Now, her barely ever eating has really nothing to do with you. Like that's on her. She's obviously struggling with something. But that doesn't mean it doesn't affect you. So again, let's go back to all the things that we were saying. Like sometimes you have to, you might not be able to go there for Yontif if it's too triggering and she might be upset. And maybe you can explain it to her, maybe you can't, but I hope this doesn't sound horrible on a live because there's so much nuance here, but like people get used to you putting up boundaries, and when you do it in a nice way and in a loving way, like clear is kind, unclear is unkind, people really do, like healthy people, even not such healthy people, they just get used to knowing that you have boundaries and that if they want to be around you, they have to respect those boundaries. Otherwise, you're not really going to be around them often. I know that sounds really harsh. Obviously, take that with a grain of salt. Every situation is differently. And I always quote this. I really don't know who said it, but I think I read it on Instagram actually, but I really love this quote also. People who benefit from your lack of boundaries, people who get upset by your lack of boundaries benefit from your lack of boundaries. So like the people in your life that really, really, truly love you and respect you, they might not be like thrilled when you put up a boundary, but for the most part, they'll try to respect it. But if somebody's like, how dare you tell me how to speak to you? Like that person obviously is benefiting from the fact that you're letting them speak to you however they please. So if you like if you're able to, verbally say like, I really don't appreciate you talking about my body. Please don't make comments about my body. Please don't call me anorexic. Please don't make comments about my food. Then if you reinforce it, like usually they get the picture. And if not, you might have to put in a stronger boundary. So I hope I answered that question. Okay, now next question is how to not overeat over the holidays. So I said before, on the one hand, you might want to have a realistic expectation that you might overeat over the holidays. On the other hand, let's just go back to the self-care. Number one, I was talking about tonight, the self-care plan. And number two, all the principles that we've spoken about that could really, really, truly be applied here during the holidays. And if you have a plan, it's obviously easier to implement than not. And even if this is your first yontif trying, just please be kind and gentle with yourself. It will probably be very hard and different. And the next holiday, you'll have more tools and more information to help you get through it. But let's say using the intuitive eating model, you want to make sure that you're eating every 2 to 3 hours. You're not getting too hungry and you're not getting too full. You can do that over the holidays. You just have to plan for it. So that means like, I'll just give you an example for myself. Like I will have maybe not a full breakfast, but before the first meal of the day, like the first big meal of the day, I'll have like a pretty filling breakfast, or like something that will hold me over. That makes me feel comfortably not too hungry, not too full for the meal. Like let's say I'll have a banana and a protein bar, or I'll have, I'm like, I don't really know, whatever is in my house I'll plan for it in the holiday. Maybe I'll go get myself a really special muffin that I don't always have around the house, but I really like it. And I'll plan that for the morning so that I know I'm full, I'm satisfied. I have the coffee that I like. And that way, when the meal actually starts, I'm hungry, but I'm not starving. Some people don't have control over any of the meals, but if you do have control over your meals, I find that this is really helpful. Like we tend to overcook. Like we really make way too much food. And I just think that that's just so overwhelming for people, especially if like you're just like trying to have a healthy relationship with food. Like maybe you like to cook like that, but if it's like you're just doing it because everyone else is doing it, like you don't have to do that. Like we recently had a meal with somebody over Shabbos, and it was like dips and challah and salad and chillin', and I was like, this is so nice. Like it's so chilled. Like I'm not thinking like, what should I eat? What should I not eat? Like not for dieting reasons, just like, do I like that? Do I not like that? It was just like easy, yummy, good company. And I was like, I really wish I actually do try to make my meals like the simpler, the better, but you don't have to have 5 sides. You don't have to even try new foods every single holiday. Of course you can, but like you have to really assess that every holiday in terms of like your self-care. Like, can you really do that? And I'll give you an example of tonight. I was making a meal for somebody who had a baby, and I made chicken and rice. So I made chicken and rice for us and them, and I just made like this huge tin of chicken and a lot of rice. And right before I was about to start, like I still have kids home that haven't started school. It's still really chaotic. And I was like, wait, I'll just cut up an onion to go under the chicken. I was like, no, I actually picked this dinner because it's the easiest dinner. And like, just stop. Like you want to do more, and I get it. I also would love to do like more like if I didn't have any other responsibilities, but I do have other responsibilities. And I also like in many ways chose those responsibilities, and I'm happy to have them. So like that might mean less elaborate meals on the holidays. And I think that we could all like lower the fanciness in my opinion, but everybody's different, maybe you just like really appreciate the fanciness and for you, this is not considered fancy because you grew up more fancy. There's so much nuance. I'm just saying I'm an out-of-towner, so I'm from Scranton, Pennsylvania. I don't, I think that like the very high fancy standard might just put a lot of pressure on all of us. And if we could like learn to like food could taste really yummy with like just spices and olive oil and honey for the holidays. It doesn't have to be so elaborate. And if you're just doing it to impress your neighbors, I would recommend that you reevaluate that. So so this means that you're making sure that you're eating every 2 to 3 hours. You have food around that you actually like, that feels good in your body. If you can, try to not overcook and just make sure that you have foods that you really enjoy. If you're not in charge of the food, I would say, like, I've told this to a lot of clients, and it might sound funny, but they find it really helpful. If you can get access to the menu, or like maybe you could just say like, hey, love to help you with the menu, so that way you could sort of like a little bit control the menu, or just know a little bit, so that way like, oh, I really love fish or soup, like all those appetizers, and then I'm so hungry when I start the meal, I have 2 bowls, and then I'm so full for the meal, but I want to eat it. And that way that you could sort of plan for that. Like, I'm going to have 1 bowl of soup, and then when the meal comes out, I'm going to enjoy it more, right? So there's a lot of really like more thinking ahead when it comes to that. Same thing with like Chalamoid in between the first days and the second days of Sukkot. There needs to, like, how many of us don't eat the whole day because we're out of the house the whole day? No, you need to make sure that you have food with you. If you don't have a sukkah, then you have to have food that you don't have to eat in a sukkah. Maybe that's a good time for you to plan like a family outing at a restaurant. And like maybe this is a good time for you to practice the satisfaction of food. What foods do you actually like? What foods can you try new on the holiday? When could you be a little bit more mindful, tasting the food, smelling the food, putting the food in your mouth, chewing it slowly? Like these, you could utilize all the intuitive eating principles, and especially the ones that we've already spoken about. Yes, I do that. It's really helpful and gives you more control over the food. Okay, that's amazing. Okay, now the next question: how to not get influenced by other people's unhealthy eating patterns and talk over Yantif, both people who overeat and those who undereat. So I think this just goes back to the unrealistic expectations. We are all influenced by our surroundings. That's the way it is. And even when I am around people over the holidays that start talking about how fat they are and how much they need to lose weight and how they really shouldn't be eating this cake, it affects me. It bothers me. I happen to be more sensitive to it because it's like something that's like so important to me. But a lot of people are sensitive to it, especially if they're like on their intuitive eating journey. It's frustrating. It's annoying. So I think that unrealistic expectations is important. Like, it will probably come up and be annoying. And that's just something that you might need to coach yourself on before. Like, I know that when I go walk into this specific family's house for this specific meal, there's going to be a lot of diet talk. That means I might have to eat before the meal because I'm not going to like any of the food, or like I'm not going to feel comfortable. That might mean that maybe the person that you're very close with, that you could ask, is it okay if we don't really have like that conversation again? I'm just like not in the mood to hear it, right? So in terms of the influence that might happen. But going back to like the self-care plan and planning in general, I think it tends to help when you go into these places where people are talking about either overeating, where you're feeling triggered by overeating or undereating. You really need to feel like you're reinforce yourself. So that might mean like having more sessions with your dietitian, your intuitive eating counselor right before Yantif. That might mean that you are like, if you listen to a certain podcast about intuitive eating or health at every size or body positivity, you're listening to the max. Like, you're listening to 1 episode a day or 2 episodes a day. If you have the intuitive eating workbook, you're doing that workbook. You have it on your head. That like you are not engaging in diet talk, and that this is not important to you. So like I said before, you think about it for a second. There's maybe you're like used to diet all the time. Like, I know from my dieting days, like I would just love to talk about the next diet and love to talk about how much weight I lost or how much weight I'm trying to lose. It's just always on your mind, because like when you deprive yourself of food, it just comes up a lot in your mind. Your mind is trying to get you to eat. So if that's the case, like I want you to try to make sure that you're like you're more focused on the things that are really important to you and that you really believe in, because these things will infiltrate your head. Okay, so yeah, so I'm just happen to be thinking, sorry, this is what I was gonna say. You know that there are people that like always talk about their job, always talk about their kids, always talk about how great they are, right? So if you like don't engage in that conversation, even if they don't realize it consciously, like subconsciously, they might just like get the hint that you're like kind of always change the subject. So it's the same thing. I think it's the same thing with dieting. If you're in a group of friends or people or family members that always talk about dieting, and you don't, it's not like you're sitting there awkwardly, you're just like kind of not engaging, maybe you move to the couch and you're reading a magazine, they just kind of pick up that you don't really want to talk about it anymore, and it's not like something of interest to you. Like, I don't know, if somebody would start talking about golf at the Shabbos table, like I would probably zone out, not in a rude way, and then I would probably make my way over to the couch and start reading a magazine. Like, I could see that happening, because I just really don't care that much about golf. I hope that doesn't offend anybody, but I just don't really personally want to talk about golf. So I think that if you're specifically working on intuitive eating, and I hope that you are, and you're trying to reject diet mentality, and you're around a lot of people who are talking about it, and you know, like maybe you're always around these people because they're your family, or you're not really around them a lot, but you know they always talk about dieting, the more that you kind of put up that wall, that boundary in a respectful, nice way, people get the point that you're not, that's not really like your like your interest. So I think, just to like reiterate, like you need to have a plan of how you're going into the holiday, making sure that you are armed with your self-care plan, that you have fun stuff that you're going to do with yourself or with your family, being realistic with yourself, and practicing self-compassion. Things will probably come up that trigger you, and that's okay. Maybe you will end up engaging in diet talk more than you want to, because you're a human, and if 10 people around you are talking about it, it's kind of hard not to. So I want you to make your self-care plan. You should do it now after this talk, because like the holidays are coming up. Are you going to the gym before the holiday? Are you getting your nails done? Are you getting a massage? Are you cooking less? Are you making less fancy foods? Are you able to find out what foods are going to be available? Could you have to bring your own foods? Do you need to put up boundaries with family members? Those are all things that you need to do before the holiday. And when the holiday does come, make sure that you are reinforcing those boundaries. Maybe you need to leave the room, change the subject, focus on something else that's important to you. Like if you brought a book with you, I always try to bring a book with me wherever I go, if I'm away for Shabbos or Yontif, because like sometimes I just need my downtime. And if I didn't say this, but I meant to say this, if there are people in your family or your friend group, or that you have in your life, whether you see them on the holiday or not, I think it's really important that you, if you have people that know about intuitive eating, health at every size, body positivity, like use them as support. Like talk to them, tell them that this is really hard for you, ask them what they do. Just if you need to vent to them, they'll understand. And I know a lot of people don't have that in their life, where like they have their go-to intuitive eating person because everyone around them is dieting. But try to find somebody. Like there's a intuitive eating Facebook group for Jewish people. Ask your friends. Like you could probably find somebody nowadays. Like so many people are learning about intuitive eating, and even like I've had this before, where I've been like in my earlier days of intuitive eating, where like somebody was talking about dieting. I'm like, oh my God, you have to hear about this intuitive eating stuff. And they're like, that's so weird. I do not care. And I was like, why? Like, this is obviously the right way to go. And then like after a few times of that happening, I realized like, oh, just because I read the book and now I totally believe in it, doesn't mean everybody's going to read the book and totally believe in it. So, but then there are other people in your life that are like, you guys totally disagree on like a lot of things, but you're really respectful of her or him, and they're really respectful of you. So like you could still kind of like have a conversation with them about the things that are like bothering you. I think it's called intuitive eating from women or something like that. You could look it up. I don't know the name of the group. If anybody knows it, they could put it here, and I'll try. If you want to DM me, I'll try to get you the name. If anybody else has any questions, comments, concerns, I'm here for the next minute. Okay. Thank you for listening. I hope you all have a beautiful holiday. I hope you take really good care of yourself. I hope it's relaxing. I hope you have really good food, and I hope you feel you get yourself new clothes, you do your affirmations, you remember that your weight has nothing to do with your worth, and that you have a beautiful holiday. Thank you for joining tonight. Have a good night.